Hi there. So we're going to cover a couple things in this video. One is right side, wrong side. And with that, also reading your stitches. I'm going to also incorporate seed stitch, slip, slip, knit, and I think that might be it for the moment. There'll be some more videos coming. So this is what's considered to be the right side. And the reason why it's referred to as the right side, as you'll see, these are all knit stitches. When you're looking at your stitches, you're looking for, trying to find one that's quite pronounced. I'm looking for V shapes. So where my thumb is, you see an upside down V, another upside down V. That's kind of an abstract upside down V. There's also this, and that's mainly the yarn, the tension, and the gauge. But these are all knit stitches. Okay, it looks like a little blurry in the video. On the other side, these little peas or pods that I refer to, where my thumb is, okay, you see these little peas? Those are all purl stitches. This is the wrong side. So whenever a pattern is referring to right side and wrong side, it's referring to this. When you're ribbing, or in this case, let's do a seed stitch, which is a single seed stitch, which is also referred to as a moss stitch. In this case, so we're going to actually purl. And even though it's the wrong side, now we're going to knit, because a seed stitch is one knit, one purl on every single row. Now, as you may notice, when I'm knitting, the yarn is in the back of my needle, in the back of my work. I have to bring it between the two needles and introduce purlwise or from the top. And I refer to this stitch as the top. This is also purlwise, wrapping, bring that out. Then again, knit, as you can see, normal. And now we're purling. Oops. I dropped that stitch, so I'm sliding it back on, and I'm going to do this again as if I'm resetting everything. Purl, back this up. Moving my yarn between the needles, it's going to the back, so now I'm knitting. And by the way, my cameraman today is my son, who is so graciously helping me with this video. So my needle goes in from the top of the stitch, which is purlwise, and I'm purling. Wrap this around, and then I knit. Okay. So this is the first row. It's not so easy to see, but that's okay. You can stay right there, hon. It's all right. I'll do the movement. It'll make it easier. So where my thumb is, there's a purl stitch, a knit stitch, purl stitch. Oops, it's a little blurry. Let me move it and find it. Okay. Knit stitch, purl stitch, where my top of my thumb. No need to move. Purl stitch. Oops, knit stitch and then a purl stitch. So this is a seed stitch. A seed stitch is always, let's do that one more time. So now what happens, this is a good example. Here's a purl stitch right here. So with a seed stitch on top of the purl stitch, I'm now going to do the opposite, which is knit. And that's the nature of a seed stitch or moss stitch. If you see so here's a knit stitch, And because there's a knit stitch, I need to purl. Where normally in knitting you would knit the knits and purl the purls, in seed stitch you do the opposite. If you see a knit stitch, you purl. If you see a purl stitch in this case, you now knit. And here is a knit stitch. See how it's straight up and down? There's no bump there. That's a knit stitch. I do the opposite. I now have to purl and put a purl stitch on top of that knit stitch. That is a purl. That's what a seed or moss stitch is consistent of. In this case, there's a little bump right there. That's a purl stitch. So now I'm going to put a knit stitch on top of that purl stitch. All right. There's a knit stitch. Bring the yarn between the needles. And I'm going to go into the stitch purlwise and purl on top of that knit stitch. Again, there's a purl. On top of that purl stitch, I will knit. Oops, this is a good example. I'm supposed to knit, but what I did is I forgot to move the yarn. So it has to move back between the needles to the back, and I'm going to knit. Okay. And the last stitch here is what do I have here? I do my reference. So this is a purl stitch. It's on the edge, so it's got this little 45-degree angle, but that's a purl stitch. So now I'm going to knit. Don't move. I'll move to you, okay? You don't move. So now what you see, do you see this staggered stitch pattern? That's the moss stitch or the seed stitch. Again, for the moment, it's very clear which side is the right side and the wrong side. This where my thumb is, that's the right side. And this is, this is the wrong side. With the moss or seed stitch, you have to rely on your cast on row all the way down at the bottom. You have to rely, in this case, this is my cast on row where my thumb is. And it has to do with where the stitch is, where it lies. If it's a knit stitch or looks like a knit stitch on the cast on row, then you're on the right, that is the right side of your work. So this area is garter stitch, and it's difficult to see in garter stitch. And here at the top, the beginnings of a moss stitch, it's also difficult to determine which side is right side or wrong side. And this is actually only one cast on because of the tapered edge. But normally you would have a straight edge. You would look for the knit stitches on the cast on row. That is your determinator in reference to right side, wrong side. Okay? In this case, with the garter stitch and the moss stitch and my stockinette stitch where the thumb is, this is my right side. And it's based on my cast on row, which is difficult to see on this. I'll have another video to show more aptly where that cast on edge shows the knit stitch. Now when it comes to slip knit, let's move on to this. Now if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Drop me an email. I'm happy to answer your questions. If this video is not clear to you, completely understand. We've covered a few things here. Just drop me an email and I'll be happy to devise a video just for your needs. So slip knit. You're going to take your needle, approach the stitch knit-wise, my mistake. Approach the stitch purl-wise, pick up that stitch, slip it over from your left needle to your right needle, and repeat. Take your right needle, go to the stitch that's on your left needle, approach it purl-wise, slip it off the left needle onto the right needle, okay? Then you have these two stitches that are on your right needle. You're going to take your left needle, come in from the bottom of the stitch. Okay? And then knit the two together. What you're doing is, we'll go over it again. Whoops. Knit the two together. Okay? So as you can see, a slip slip knit is a decrease. I went from 2 stitches to 1 stitch. I'm going to do it again. Slip slip knit, right needle approaches the stitch purlwise, slips off the left needle onto the right needle, just like that. It's just a small movement. Right needle again approaches the stitch on the left needle, picks it up. The right needle picks up the stitch. The right needle is guiding the stitch off of the left needle, and the stitch remains on the right needle. Nothing additional happens, nothing fancy happens. You're literally shuffling stitches. If I just go in here and move it over, that's all you're doing. You're just moving it over. So these are the 2 stitches I just slipped over for a slip slip knit. So slip slip. Now comes the K, the knit part. My left needle comes in from the bottom or knitwise of these 2 stitches, and simply knitting 2 together. Last time I'm going to do this. So what I want you to see is slip, slip, knit, 1, 2 stitches. Come in from the bottom of 1 and then 2 and knit the 2 stitches together, and that's it. Now you could say, hey, why don't you just knit 2 stitches together? You can. If you're new at what's happened, if you're new to this, or if you find slip slip knit difficult, the problem is, and it's not a big problem, if you're only doing this, I would definitely encourage you to follow the slip slip knit. The problem is how the stitch lays. So it's all about how it lays on the needle. I'm going to knit these last 2 together, no slip slip knit, so you can see the difference. So these 2 stitches, I am slip, no, I'm sorry, not slipping at all, just knitting the 2 together. Okay. What I want you to look at, this stitch right here, look below where my needle is. Look at how the stitches are laying from right to left. That's knit together. Slip slip knit, the stitches are laying from left to right. That's slip slip knit. The reason why you do slip slip knit has to do with the design. The pattern maker had a specific intent on that stitch laying left to right with slip slip knit, where knit 2 together, it lays from right to left. So where my thumb is, you can see on the right side of my thumb slip slip knit and how it lays. On the left side of my thumb, you'll see knit together and how the stitches lay. That's the difference. So again, slip slip knit, you slip a stitch, slip a stitch. You slip both of them purlwise. You knit together knitwise, and you're done. Knit together, you will knit those knitwise, and that's it. And that's the difference. Knit together, where my thumb is, slip, slip, knit. And again, you can see how they lay counter to each other. Okay, thanks. See you in the next video.